The leader of the Donetsk People's Republic has issued a stark warning to Ukrainian forces in Severodonetsk to surrender or die as Russia seeks full control of the Luhansk region. Ukrainian authorities say Moscow is using its artillery advantage to destroy the eastern city, 70% of which it now controls. Media reports claim that the last remaining bridge out of the city has been the target of sustained Russian shelling. Many now fear that efforts to evacuate civilians will be increasingly difficult if the city is cut off. Now our correspondent Sasha Vakulina is now here in the studio with me. Sasha, so if Severodonetsk does fall, what will that make to, or how will that change Russia's war effort?
Well, the second phase of this war, the second phase, which was called by Moscow, the battle for Donbass, in fact, it has been the battle for Severodonetsk. And it's been now weeks that we have been observing Russian and Ukrainian forces going back and forth. Every single day we're talking about meters, about streets, and the fighting still continues. Now, this stark warning today, surrender or die, and also the fact that Russian forces are shelling this massive industrial zone with the Azot chemical plant reminds us what happened in Mariupol. So this is similar situation happening there, of course, as well, because at Azot chemical plant there are 500 civilians believed to be sheltering there, including 40 children. Should those bridges fall and should those roads fall, that means no evacuation for civilians would be possible. This is not just about Ukrainian defenders. So this is where the situation is getting really similar to what we've seen in Mariupol. Now, how important is Severodonetsk? Again, Russian forces have spent weeks and weeks trying to capture this city. Initially, there was around 100,000 people living in Severodonetsk. Now, between 10 to 15,000 believed to still remain there. It is important for several reasons for Russians. That would mean if they manage to get Severodonetsk and then also neighboring Lysychansk, that would allow Russian army to reach the Luhansk region's administrative border. Now, this is not Donbass area yet, but this is a big part of Donbass area. So, of course, this is a very symbolic meaning for Russian forces in this war. And also that would mean the highway between Lysychansk and Bakhmut. This is the road that is used to supply the Ukrainian military. So this is another tactical meaning and importance for Russian forces there.
Sasha Vakulina, thank you. And elsewhere, hundreds of civilians in Kharkiv have been killed by indiscriminate Russian shelling since the start of the invasion. Well, that's according to the latest report from Amnesty International. The NGO accuses Moscow of using banned cluster munitions to attack Ukraine's northeastern city. Now, I'd like to bring in Donatella Rovera, who is Amnesty International's Senior Crisis Response Advisor, who's also one of the co-authors of this report. Thank you there, Donatella, for joining us here on Euronews tonight. You've been on the ground in Kharkiv to investigate this. What did you see?
Death and destruction, really. Civilians in every district of the city of Kharkiv, residential areas, who have been killed and maimed in their homes while out on the streets queuing for humanitarian aid or trying to do some shopping. Absolutely everywhere, and with absolutely no way of protecting themselves, because such indiscriminate strikes have been happening at any time of day or night throughout the city, really. So for people, the only option was to remain inside basements or inside the metro stations, which many have been doing for 3 months now in order to protect themselves from these indiscriminate strikes. Russian forces have been bombarding the city of Kharkiv relentlessly on a daily basis, using both internationally banned cluster munitions, but also other weapons which are not banned per se, such as Grad rockets, unguided artillery shells, but which are battlefield weapons, which should never be used in residential areas around civilians, because these are weapons that cannot be aimed at a specific target. They are indiscriminate. Such attacks constitute war crimes because they do not make the difference between civilians and military targets.
Well, Russian officials have repeatedly claimed that they don't target civilians. What kind of evidence do you have on the contrary to that, and how might this evidence be used?
Well, first of all, the Russian authorities cannot ignore that their indiscriminate attacks have caused so many deaths and injuries among civilians. First of all, because they know very well how the weapons that their forces have been using work. I.e., they are inherently inaccurate, and therefore those attacks are indiscriminate. At all the locations where we investigated attacks, we found remains of the weapons that were used, remains of the cluster munitions, remains of the Grad rockets, of the artillery shells. We, of course, interviewed not only the survivors, but also a large number of witnesses. We also reviewed material which is available on open sources, including satellite imagery. So the evidence is overwhelming. The Russian authorities cannot claim that they didn't know that they were causing so many death and injury, because Amnesty International and others have been documenting and reporting on this civilian death and casualties from the very first day of the Russian invasion at the end of February. So this is very well known.
And many may still remember those harrowing images from Bucha, for example, with those killed civilians with hands tied behind their backs. And now we have this new report from Amnesty today about a playground attack on people queuing for humanitarian aid. Do you have any kind of sort of a full scope of the complete picture of those attacks across Ukraine on civilians?
Yes, I mean, I also previously investigated the extrajudicial executions in the areas north of Kyiv, so in Bucha and many other villages, as well as bombardments in other parts of the country, such as, again, in the area north of Kyiv. The patterns vary from place to place. So, for example, in Kharkiv, we've seen a real concentration of completely indiscriminate attacks that have been launched against the city day in, day out, and with a huge cost to the civilians of this city. In most of the attacks that I've investigated, these involve the use of multiple rockets, munitions falling over several streets and causing multiple casualties. For example, in an attack that I investigated in Miru Street, southeast of the city center, killed 9 civilians and injured more than 35, including children. Some of those who were injured, the attack was on the 15th of April, almost 2 months ago, continue to remain in critical condition. One of those who was injured, a 41-year-old woman, died the day before yesterday of those injuries. So the scale is very wide.